Alright guys, we're going to get this bike finished and get this thing running today. It's supposed to be up in the 40s in the next few days. So we'll be able to actually take this thing out and start riding it and run through its paces. So the first thing we're going to do is start getting these motor mounts right here put on. And then we'll go ahead and get the engine on and then get the chain lined up. And once the chain's lined up, we pretty much just got to tighten everything up. And from there, it's pretty simple. So we'll go ahead and get started on this. Alright, so I went ahead and stuck the bolts already in there so they're poking out. Now the way I have this set up is I want the bolts to be through the holes right here on the frame. I want them all the way forward on there. That's the way I have it set up to where the motor sits back far enough. And we'll go ahead and drop this side on. Oh, that bolt popped back through. There we go. The bolts I'm running are a little bit bigger than what these holes. I might want to actually eventually drill these out, but I think I'll just use a magnet pen to kind of just get some pressure on it, and it'll slide right through. There it goes. And basically the idea is I want these far as forward as possible. And that way when I bolt the motor on, it's not going to run into the fuel neck. So I'll go ahead and get these bolts on here, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so I got plenty of clearance up here in front of the motor. It's kind of hard to see that. See if I can get in there. I still got to put the bolts in, but I am noticing something. It's going to, no matter what, when the engine rocks, when you give it throttle, it's going to touch this. So I'm going to slide this back out. Basically just take a little ball peen hammer and kind of just put a little indent right there on top of the valve cover, because I know for a fact these motors, no matter what you put on a mini bike or whatever, they always tend to rock back a little bit. So, and I want to make sure I'm not smacking that, because that would be the last thing you want to do is break that off and all of a sudden all the fuel in the bike's just being poured out. So we'll go ahead and dent that in a little bit. Alright, so got that pretty much caved in around there. You can cave these in pretty decent without having to worry about it, because of the fact that the top of the valve cover is actually part of your vent system for the motor. So you're not going to hit the rockers unless you bend it too far. I'm pretty sure if you got that far, it'd be pretty hard to bend, because then you're bending the inside of the valve cover. But now you can see that there's clearance through there. You can see how I kind of caved it in. What I did is I used an extension and just kind of with a I think it was a 13mm socket, and then I was able to get that nice curve into it. That way it doesn't look like you just bashed it with a hammer. So that's all on now. The bolts fit. I got the bolts in. I haven't put nuts or anything on them. Go ahead and get the bolts in here. The front bolts are pretty easy to put on. It's the back ones, because you have to go through here the way this is. I thought about drilling all the way through and just running a long bolt so it comes out to right here, but then I'm cutting another hole in the frame. So what I usually do, well, there's two ways I do it. I can't talk today. I either use a magnet pen. Sometimes I get away with just doing that. If not, then I'll just use a wrench, use this, and where did I set it? Some electrical tape. Put the electrical tape around the nut, stick it inside the wrench, and then it'll hold the nut for you, so you can get in there and then to get it started and get the thread started. Then after that, you just tighten it up. So it's not a huge problem, but that is one downfall running this type of mount, is just these 2 bolts. But besides that, everything else is pretty good with them. So we'll go ahead and get them bolts on. I'm not going to tighten them bolts though until I get the chain on, because you want to get this chain close as you can to pretty much dead lined up, and then tighten it down. That way you don't have any alignment issues when you go to ride it or anything like that. So we'll go ahead and get that on there, and we'll go from there. Alright, got the bolts in there. They're not tight, so we can readjust the motor. I would recommend, if you're going to run, if you make these amounts, put the bolt in there first before you put your torque converter on, because I usually look through the front holes right here, and it's kind of a nightmare because you can't really reach to get to the bolt. You have to be on the other side, so it's just a lot easier to get started. Once you have the bolt started though, then you can just put it on, because you're just sticking a wrench up and down inside there. So we'll go ahead and get the chain on, make sure it's all aligned, tighten the motor down. Already got a fuel line on here. We might be able to get away with running the stock spark plug wire on here. It's hitting the frame right now, but I think the engine needs to slide over this way just a little bit, and if that's the case, this will fit. If not, we'll just chop this off, or we may have to put a little flat spot in this, just that way it clears the frame. And then from there we just hook up throttle, and we should put some oil in it, and we should be able to fire this thing up. So let's get the chain on. Alright, so I got the chain on there. Now, it was kind of a pain for the fact that I did something I didn't do the first time I built one of these motor mounts, is I drilled the holes out bigger. These are the original ones I had on this bike. I drilled these holes out bigger, and it gives you a little bit more wiggle room to slide the engine back and forth. Well, I didn't do that to this one, I just realized. And I didn't feel like taking it all back down to re-drill them out, so I unloosened the motor mounts and just kept moving around, wiggling around, and finally got it to where the chain's not rubbing on here. If I ever take this back apart, I will drill them out. But I ended up getting it, so now it moves freely. And one thing about these torque converters, I see a lot of people burn belts up. These belts will last a long time. The problem is you gotta have these things lined up. If these are off, if this is off or this is off by a little bit, it will rub the belt and it will smoke the belt fairly quick. I think it was last year when I did one, and I rode it about, I think, 10 miles, and the belt exploded. Come to find out that this back pulley was just, it was almost where you couldn't even see it. It was off by a little bit. So after I fixed that, these belts do last a long time. It did manage to get the spark plug wire on there. That's something different too. The 224 from the 212 is, when I put the 212 on here, I had to actually cut the spark plug wire and put a new end on it, because this was smacking the frame. Well, at the 224 it actually clears, so there must be a little bit of difference between the 212 and the 224 in that area. And then we'll go ahead and just get the fuel line hooked up. I'll find a place to mount this for right now, probably just over here. And once we have that on, we'll throw some oil in this thing. I will swap the exhaust out real quick, and maybe I ought to get it on the ground and fire it up for the first time. This motor hasn't ran in a while. The carb should be good. I rode the last time before I pulled it off the mini bike. I rode it, so that way make sure the carburetor, make sure this motor is running like it's supposed to before I go and do all this. So let's go ahead and get that stuff done, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so got the exhaust done. Went ahead and just used the old muffler off of Stormfire's engine. Directly fit bolts right onto this 224, and I'm just running an old muffler I had laying around. I have to order some wrap. I'm out of it, so I'll end up wrapping that, so that way if your leg bumps it or something like that, it doesn't just burn you. So all the big stuff is done now. So the only thing left is just the throttle cable, fuel line, and put some oil in this thing, and then we can go ahead and fire this thing up. So we'll go ahead and button all this up. Alright, so one thing I like to do, pull the air filter off and make sure that your throttle is all the way to the bottom. Last thing you want to do is fire this thing up and find out you had too much tension on the throttle and this thing's running wide open or half throttle when you start it. And what I'll do is, which this one I don't really have to adjust, but sometimes you have to adjust them. So if there's that little bit of slack, I kind of prefer that. I can take that out if I wanted to. If you want to take that any slack out, just watch your throttle right here and twist the bottom right here, and as soon as you see it raise, then just back it off just a little bit, and then that'll take the slack out of the throttle. So, but I usually leave a little bit of slack. Alright guys, got it on the ground, got everything buttoned up on it. The only thing I still left to do, I have to wrap the exhaust, but I'm waiting on wrap for that, and then I'm going to put a fuel shut off soon on this. I couldn't find the one I originally had, but we'll go ahead and we'll start this thing up and see how it runs, and it should run pretty good. See if I can start this one-handed. Like I said, it hasn't been started in a while. There we go. That paint came out. It's actually kind of cool looking. I'll wait till I get it out in the sunlight. But she's ready for the test ride. I just gotta wait for the warmer weather. So I want to thank you guys for watching this, and hope you guys are all having a good day, and hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. Thanks for watching.